Hello, everybody. We're happy to see you all at this webinar, and what we're going to talk about while we just, getting started and warming up. Let's wait for everybody to join and briefly start with the round of introductions. I'm Mike, CTO and founder at Callstack, and today with me is Burak.
Yeah, and I'm Burak. I maintain React Native Builder Pop and interested in brownfield in general.
Nice. So today we're going to talk about brownfield, right? Which is basically a way to start using React Native inside existing mobile applications. And I've been doing brownfield for a while. I think ever since we started the company, brownfield was obviously one of the most important topics that people were interested in because, sometimes we start new applications, but many times we actually have to deal with something that is already existing. And I spent quite some time on the library side and React Native side. You, Burak, you are on the application front-end side. And I know the reason you're here is because you actually tried all the things that I'm talking about yourself. So we can relate that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that project you're working on right now, the project with the brownfield integration, okay, we'll get to it probably during the presentation. I'm just trying to figure out the screen sharing situation here. I guess probably the best way would be to do it this way. Okay, hold on a second. So we'll start briefly, and to do so, I will be sharing the slides. Burak, do you have setup for sharing the slides in the meantime? Because I'm having some technical difficulties. I wonder if...
Okay, just a second and I can share.
That would be very helpful. So we can get started. Meanwhile, I can briefly walk you through the agenda for today. The agenda is that we'll do a short presentation. Overall, we will spend up to an hour talking about brownfield. What we will start with first is going through a bit of slides where we can talk about React Native, how it integrates and all the things. And then we will talk about implementation itself and how all these pieces sort of play together. So we already went through the introductions, so we can start with the React Native architecture, which is the diagram we have on the next slide. And it's beautiful with the animations. So basically, before we go deeper into React Native brownfield, let's talk about how React Native works under the hood, so you can have a perfect understanding of it. And then a lot of things that we will be talking about will become much easier for you to sort of understand. So React Native has two layers. The first one, JavaScript layer, is where you write your code, right? It's the UI components, business logic. It's all using React's intuitive component model. So this is, clean, a very clean way to write platform independent code and describe what you want to do. And then below that, you have the native layer. And this is the magic that then turns your React code into real platform specific components and behaviors. Now, for example, like on this slide, when you write your component to show a movie card, the native layer in the middle, and I see, Burak, you don't have the fancy font library that I have with there's supposed to be an arrow in the middle, but question mark is also okay because what is really going on here is the fun part. But that native layer is what makes the component on the left side be an actual native component on the right side. And the key here is that you only write your code once on the top side. So the native layer takes care of all the complexity for you. And that separation of concerns is what actually makes React Native pretty powerful for cross-platform development. And then let's talk about separation of concerns. React Native provides the entire native implementation for you. So green stuff, it's not just native code with few modules. It's actually an entire rendering engine, tooling for debugging, profiling, and access to native APIs. So everything that you need to write performant native code is there for you. You can just focus on building cool features with JavaScript. So not having to worry about native is one great thing. Another is faster time to market. And the reason for that is, first of all, you're working with JavaScript and TypeScript. So languages that are very fast to develop in, right? And then they also have excellent LLM and AI tool support. That accelerates your development process from day one. And if you could, Burak, just press space twice, we'll see the beautiful cards. Yes. And then the third one is when you build a feature for React Native, you can deploy it across multiple platforms simultaneously, right? So you don't have to build the same feature once. 3-4 times, you can just build it once. So that is second benefit. Another benefit is fewer bugs across platforms. So first of all, when you find and fix an issue, that fix will apply across all platforms immediately. And there is no need to fix the same issue, multiple times in different code bases. And then second of all, even better, once you test things and sort of fix it, you can verify it once and kind of make sure that it is working everywhere. And that dramatically reduces your overall Q&A time. And finally, perhaps the most practical advantage of all is the knowledge transfer. So, first of all, you are a web developer, so you already know JavaScript. Second of all, we all, as long as we are developers, understand the development patterns of the web. And lastly, we all know React. So that means, everybody who's either writing JavaScript, is more or less familiar with web development, or is building with React, can get productive with React Native immediately. And that is pretty awesome, because once you start integrating React Native into your mobile apps, you're opening your native code bases to a huge number of people that wouldn't be able to sort of work with your code base otherwise. That makes scaling much easier. Now that we understand all the benefits, let's talk about the actual brownfield journey to achieve the shared code base. Before we do that, let's try to visualize it. So this is more or less the state you have today. Web using React, and typically Android and iOS using Kotlin and Swift. And each platform has its own implementation, own development cycle, own maintenance needs. And then on the right side, this is where we want to be. We want to have unified React Native code base powering all platforms. One implementation, one deployment cycle, shared maintenance. So what we really want to do is we want to get from this, which is same component written twice in both Swift and Android, to this, a very clean and elegant React component that works across all the platforms. I know this looks pretty sweet, but in reality, React Native never replaces your entire code base. We often talk about React Native migrations, and people go crazy with, chasing this 100% React Native rewrite. In practice, what really ends up being is React Native being part of your stack. Like in this case, coexisting with Swift, iOS, Kotlin, on Android, and Swift and iOS. So what is the advantage if that's the case? Well, one of them, my favorite one, to be honest, is that you can keep your apps fully functional and continue development while you work towards sharing code with React Native. You can gradually integrate React Native features into your application, and the migration strategy you choose, and we'll talk about migration strategies later. And then you get to keep native code where it makes sense. So say you have some native functionalities where you care about performance, or you typically deal with some sort of secure, sensitive data, you can keep that as is. There is no need to rewrite everything to React Native if it doesn't make sense. And lastly, you can choose how fast you want to do it. You can take necessary measurements and decide what's best for your users. That's pretty cool, right? So let's see how we can make that migration happen. So today we're going to show you how to take one React component and integrate it with existing native applications. And we will have two strategies. The simple one, and this is sort of the simple one you can get started with, the one you can see online. And we'll do it just for the sake of setting up the context. And then we will talk about the more advanced way of doing brownfield applications, the one that Burak has been working on in production, that I've been working on as well. And so you will be able to see some actual production cases with that. And at the end, if you have any questions or you will want to follow up later, we will be able to accommodate that as well. And for the sake of doing that demonstration, we will be using iOS for two reasons. First of all, we don't have time to do both. And second of all, typically iOS is always easier to present unless we are talking to somebody who's been talking Java for the past 20 years, then it might be the other way around. So a lot of what we'll be talking about, like I said, is publicly available knowledge, at least for the first part. You can check the official documentation of React Native. Very good resource, highly recommended. And the React team did pretty good job making that documentation a very good resource. So I would say it is worth giving them a shout out on this occasion. So the first thing we'll start with is the project structure. The key is organization. You want your React Native code to live alongside your native application. This means creating a directory for React Native somewhere inside your actual native application, typically side-by-side iOS and Android folders. That way you can keep things organized. And again, this is just one way to do it. You can do it any way you want, but typically, if you were to follow the React Native Getting Started guide, you would do this because that's just the way it is recommended, and it is actually very simple. Next, we need to get React Native and its dependencies working, and this is a very important step. Now, if you have JavaScript background, you're like, okay, whatever, that is basic knowledge. The challenge is, and this is the reason why we have created the advanced way of doing brownfield, is this is not the case for the rest of your team. So the challenge is, and we'll talk about challenges later, once you integrate React Native, now everybody on your team has to run npm install. And obviously, if you have a team of 50 native engineers, that is not optimal for many reasons. So we will have to install it with npm. That means you must install Node.js as well. Once that's done, you will get Node modules folder in your workspace, typically very close to where you install your React Native. And this is where React Native will be, as well as other dependencies. And this is the React Native is inside Node modules, and the reason for that is React Native does not use Coca pods or Maven for distributing its binaries, because there is a lot of dependencies between JavaScript and native. Their decision has been made to sort of go back to shipping binaries with npm package. So if you have native background, you might be slightly confused, but this is just to make sure that we don't have some dependency misaligned versioning issues later in production when using JavaScript. Now, once we have that, we can jump to configuring pod file. And again, this is iOS, so on Android, that would be Gradle. If you already have pod file, like many iOS projects do, you will go there and you will add React Native line. You can see there in the middle, and that's where things get started. So there is a lot of code here, and on the next slide, I have highlighted the actual code that is specific to React Native. If you're starting fresh, React Native provides a pod file you can use out of the box. Either way, the end result is the same. You have this pod file, and that pod file will generate an entire XE workspace when you run pod install, which is the next step. After that, once you run it, you will receive an XE workspace structure on your inside your project. As you can see on the next slide, is going to be a inside iOS folder Xcode project and XE workspace. So the idea is that once this is created, you have everything set up and you can start using the XE workspace. So if you've been building a fresh native iOS application, you probably didn't have XE workspace. So this will be a new project for you. But in reality, all the projects, or most of them, are already using Coca pods and are probably quite large and old. And in such cases, you will have XE workspace already, and adding React Native will feel a bit like adding another library dependency to your project. It's just that this one will be compiled kind of from source. That's why you will feel like you're struggling with JavaScript, even though it's a dependency of your project. So now, before we render React Native inside, let's take a look at the index.js of React Native application. This will help us understand what's going on. And as you can see, there is so much stuff inside that I had to do the scroll animation. And we're not going to talk about everything here. In fact, we're just going to focus on what's most important, which is app registry component that I highlighted for you on the next slide. The app registry is a module that allows you to explicitly register React components that can be referenced from the native side. And if you are new to React Native brownfield or adapting React Native, this is probably the key highlight that you have to keep in mind and understand. When you register a React component with the app registry, you can reference it from the native side. And the strategy you choose is up to you. You can register one. Typically, that's what's by the default, which is just one big root component. But doesn't have to be, right? If you decide that you want to replace 5 components gradually, so starting small and going up the tree, in that case, you may decide to register a few. And as you can see on the next slide, we have RCT root view factory, which is an abstraction provided by React Native on iOS. And we can use that helper to instantiate a UI view that will be pointing to that React component. And that is the module name and initial properties in case you wanted to pass some additional options. And we'll talk about it later as well in Burak's part, how we can leverage that to provide some additional abstraction for type safety specifically. So when we put that view on the screen, that root view, UI view, what will happen is on the next slide, you will see we have a hello world, the purple component. This is the full screen React component. So as you can see, it is really just taking, sorry, in this case, I actually made a mistake. So let me go back one sentence. This is the default React application, actually. So what I was supposed to say is that the purple one is actually React component. So when you start a fresh React application, the app registry will instantiate this hello world, and the purple stuff will be hello world. Now, on the next slide, and this is what I was meaning to say, is when you register multiple components, in this case, active order, bottom tabs, and hello world, you'll see that you have an opportunity to render 3 of them on the native side. And in this case, we're rendering them one next to another, which obviously makes sense. But imagine you were building an Uber, and one of the components was the header, another one was, I don't know, the Uber rides component, and the last one was payments module. So it's sort of a lot of flexibility in here, depending on how you want to do it. And this is the strength of React Native, the fact that it seamlessly integrates with your existing code bases. And at the same time, it provides the primitives. It uses native primitives as well. So it is, at the end of the day, UI view. No way you can differentiate it if you've done your styling right. And that's it. If you end up following this route, you should follow the documentation step by step. The next slide will show you the link. This is the link to Xcode, additional Xcode steps. And for the brevity of this webinar, I decided to skip some steps. So I hope that we made this easy part even easier, and it seems like super, super fun stuff to do. I have to give you a little warning that there are a few more steps in there that you should actually pay attention to. And I guess that brings us to the challenges. So let me just do a quick introduction to Burak's part by saying what's wrong with this approach, and that will set the scene for the second part. One significant consideration is that your native development team will need to work with the JavaScript pipeline, right? Like I said, this isn't necessarily a blocker, but it can create friction when even small React Native features require all engineers to handle additional workflow steps. And from my personal experience, and I've been, working with React Native for, it's crazy to say, but I believe it's going to be around 9 years. And this has always been an issue. Um, what is my native Steam reaction going to be, and so on and so on. And second of all, good understanding of JavaScript ecosystem. So without good understanding of the JavaScript ecosystem, troubleshooting these issues will be a challenge because, okay, like I'm working with JavaScript day to day, and now with AI and Cursor, it is even easier. But every time, just think about, like, if you're a JavaScript engineer, just think about how many times you had an issue with native build problems and you spent hours troubleshooting that, learning how CMake works and stuff like that. It is the same for native developers, just the other way around. So depending on your background, you may realize quickly and early on that putting that into your code base, the stakeholders in your team will quickly say this is a no-go because we're not adding additional technical debt. We are supposed to move faster, not slow everybody down. So these are the challenges. And from those challenges, we came up with the idea for advanced React Native integration. And this is what Burak's been working with. So that said, I'll pass it over to you, Burak, now.
Okay.
And I'm also happy to help with the slides. But if you have your setup up and running, feel free to continue.
Sure, I can go on.
Okay.
So again, we have lots of these challenges, and I think like these challenges personally hurt me because like I can imagine a native team lead stepping in and telling me what to add or what to not add to my React Native application, and like that wouldn't be the most ideal case. So to solve all these problems, we have developed a more advanced React Native integration. We use a component that we call the bridge component. So let's take a look at what the bridge component looks like and what it exactly does. Okay, at a high level, this is what our advanced React Native integrations architecture is. We have three main layers, three main boxes. We got the React Native layer at the top. So the React Native layer contains our JavaScript code, the React code, and then we have a bridge component just below the React Native layer, which sits just in the middle. And this component is tasked with handling all the communication between my JavaScript code, iOS, and Android. So when I have to call a native API, I have to make a call to my native application. I want to show something like show a model that's implemented in my native Android application. What I do from JavaScript is make a call to the bridge component, and then the bridge component is tasked with going to the Android app or the iOS app and calling the right APIs and then showing me the model that I wanted to show. So the bridge component is tasked with communication. It just glues everything together. It glues my JavaScript code with everything else. And let's talk about the benefits and some of the key challenges. So first of all, this approach provides some clean packaging. When I have my React Native application package, this means I ship everything as a pre-compiled artifact. What this means is I build my React Native code in advance before I'm passing it to the native teams. And this will mean for them that they won't have to pay the price of building React Native if they want to use it in the app. You build it, you pay the price of building React Native. You, as a React Native team, pay it. And then once the native team receives that package, they don't have to pay it anymore because the code has already been built. They just have to consume a library. And then we have a single package. And then in that package, we have all our React Native components with their business logic registered. So this means I have a single package with everything about React Native. I don't have to worry about anything else. And then I assume you have some native engineers that already know how to consume a library, like how to consume a library from Maven, how to consume an XC framework, or even as an SPM package. We have this approach, so the native developers can just take the React Native code and add it as any library to the native applications. And then let's look at how it looks like in practice. So what we do is we create an Xcode project, an Xcode library, and that library produces an XC framework file on iOS. And we have a pod file in the example, but that doesn't mean that you have to add Cocoa pods to your native application. It just gives you an XC framework, which means you can either directly consume it, use Cocoa pods to consume it, or you can also use SPM's ability to ship XC frameworks. So if you have a like pure Swift code base that you don't want to add any Cocoa pods, you don't want to add any XC frameworks manually because you might be interested in not having to deal with the versions, you can just use SPM, and the SPM can handle grabbing the right XC framework for you. And then on Android, we have an AAR file. So you can push this to Maven, your private one, and then you can just consume it as any other library. Here we have the implementation, and this just consumes our React Native application. So let's take a look at what am I sending now? So I said that we have a package, but that package, what's inside that package? Inside that package is we have a library, and all the libraries need to have a public interface, because when the native developers import that library into their apps, they have to somehow be able to call some code like load a Viv controller to show a React Native application. So what we do is we design a carefully crafted public API interface. So we typically expose a Viv control like in this, but we can also pick to just ship a Viv. You don't have to always ship a Viv controller. In this case, what we do is we call the React root Viv factory API to create a root Viv, and then this all happens internally. So your application devs don't have to know what the React root Viv factory does. It's just our internal interface. So once that's all done, so once all that's all done, we go to the native application and just import the library that we published earlier. In this case, you can take a look at the importer library line. And once library is imported, we load our Viv controller as any other. It says let React VC equals to our hello world Viv controller. And this is the Viv control that we have exposed from our library. And then once that's done, we can obviously present it, do anything we want. And that's just React Native at this point. You don't have to worry about anything else. The second benefit is we can enable type safety this way. Because normally when you have the classic approach or the simpler approach, you really don't have a public interface. You just have the React internals, you can use them, and you basically call any view with a string name. And that doesn't seem safe, because what I can do is instead of hello world, I can do hello world, just forget the D, and my view is not going to be loading. But in this case, we can have type safety in our public interface, and that will ensure that the native developers don't import the import with the wrong name. So we have strong type checking. We can also pass the arguments with correct types to the library. And then lastly, thanks to the compile time safety, I don't even have to run my app to see if React Native is working properly, because I have static type checking, and everything is, if everything has the correct types, everything should work properly. And then here we have an example of what the type safety looks like. So in this case, I am creating a new struct called hello world config, and this internally accepts a show user greeting Boolean. And then once we have that, what we can do is we can go back to our Viv controller class and accept this config structure as the init parameter. So when you want to create a new hello world Viv controller, you also have to pass this config. And what we do internally after that is there's this argument that the create root Viv function accepts called initial properties. So whatever you pass to the initial properties are going to be passed to the React Native, the React component props. And what this means is when I render my component, my show user greeting prop will be whatever the native engineer sets it to. And then here we have the React code, for instance. I have my application, this const app is my React functional component. It receives my props as arguments. And inside that props, I have my show user greeting constant. And then based on that, I can either show the hello world or not. and I receive this prop from the native side. I don't have this defined anywhere in my React application. And then in the native side, what I do is when I am consuming the hello world view of controller from my application, I first create my config, and creating that, I have my hello world config struct, and then I just pass it the props that I want. In this case, I have true as show user greeting, and then I just pass it to my hello world view controller. And notice that this is all type safe. So if I ever try to pass something to my React component that doesn't even exist, it's not going to be a problem because I have everything strictly typed. I have compile time, type safety. And then also it would be nice to mention that, oh, I have my React Native views and I have my native application. And what I can do is I can take my native views and then take my React Native views and then put it into the native application. But it's also important to say that I can do the exact opposite. I can get my native views, like let's say I have built a custom payroll screen that I want to show, but inside my React Native portion. What I can do is I can wrap it and then just push it to the React Native. And once that's done, my native application will render my React Native component, and then the React Native component will render the native component. And actually, this is what happens with React Native. When you render text, when you render any views, it's going to be showing the native component itself. When you use a web view, for instance, it's going to use a native web view. So why shouldn't it be possible to do it with any other views? Yeah. So I think, Mike, you can take it over now.
Okay. Thank you, Burak. So that was the advanced way of doing things. So now you more or less know how to approach those two things. So let's talk about the universal best practices. So the things that make sense regardless of which one approach you go with. And actually, even regardless of whether you even choose React Native in the first place. So this might be interesting for you regardless. So let's talk about migration strategy, the first one. Most companies can't really pause development or migrate everything at once. So first of all, we typically recommend an iteration screen by screen approach. So this is the first step. Then the idea is to start small, validate React Native in a controlled environment, and finally gradually expand based on the success. So let's have a look at the application structure. This is a typical structure, may depend on your application, but typically you would have login, dashboard, maybe some screens, FAQ, and help. So we have to look for the best candidate for the migration. And on the highlighted slide, on the section, like on this slide now, you can see I highlighted FAQ and help, which are usually the best starting points. They're often non-critical, even though you want your users to get some help. You typically already use a web view there. So, that makes them perfect fit for React Native because you likely have some JavaScript under the hood anyway. And we can take application approach, but also the next alternative approach is a component level migration. And in this case, we can be even more granular. We can, instead of replacing the whole FAQ screen, we can take advantage of what Burak's has been showing us at the very end with the sort of bidirectional approach. We can go even lower and register, instead of a big FAQ screen, imagine you created 5 different small React components, or even if you have React on the web, you would have a component for everything, because everything is a component. So you could have a button, or you could have a navbar. All these can be ported over to React Native component by component. So you don't have to go for the whole screen if you're concerned that you want to start even smaller. So in this case, FAQ item would be the smallest one. And then we would be going up, building up this as we continue. So that is the sort of migration approach. Now, when we migration, another best practice is the sort of brownfield setup in general. We shouldn't aim for 100% React Native because brownfield is a valid end goal. It's not a temporary state. So if we go over to the next section, we will see that I created a breakdown of how you can think about using native code where it makes sense. So first of all, keep in mind that React Native excels at coexisting with your native code base, and this should be viewed as a first-class solution, not a compromise. And some features like CPU-intensive work or cross-platform C++ libraries make more sense to keep native. Like there is no need to rewrite these in JavaScript. In fact, if you've been following trends, the trend is the opposite, actually. On the other hand, your UI or business logic makes perfect sense to be written in React Native because you can share it with your web implementation. And finally, another universal best practice that you will need is very crucial is the monitoring. So you have to implement proper telemetry to understand your results in production. First of all, one good practice that we use at Callstack is DMAIC methodology, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, control. It is a very nice and lightweight framework on how to think about finding performance problems, analyzing them, and fixing them in your code base, making sure they never happen again. Second of all, there is real user monitoring for production insights, which means getting actual data from user devices and seeing how the results of your work translate to actual end users. And finally, you can consider using OpenTelemetry for comprehensive data collection. And a little sneak peek, we've been using this internally for a few of our customers. There is a library coming up. So if you're rolling out your custom solution right now, or you feel like I would have to sort of build it myself, there will be something from us for you to use. So getting all that all together, here's an example of hypothetical migration from a web view and how you can measure it to provide us the feedback. Thanks to real user monitoring, we can have a very good information before and after how the change or introduction of React Native is impacting the performance of a particular screen. In this case, everything you see on the screen is made up, but it's just here to show you the sort of reason behind doing all that. And if we started using React Native, say for help section or FAQ section, what we typically see with our customers is much better performance of sections that were web views otherwise, much better satisfaction because the native layouts and the UI provides much better user experience. And after all, overall, the impact is positive. You can see faster loading time. Everybody is happy. We have validated the approach and we are ready to go. So as you can see, this is all very good. And you might be asking yourself question, like who's really doing that? And let me tell you that everybody's doing this, pretty much everybody, unless you're a startup. But typically, these two players are worth a shout. Shopify recently completed the migration from fully native to React Native. So they transitioned and repurposed their entire organization from being native organization to React and React Native organization. They still do maintain native pieces where it makes sense, but in principle, they are React Native first right now. And they're a pretty interesting company to sort of call out because typically, and this is what we presented to you today as well, the migration strategy is to start from bottom up, take least important screens, validate how React Native behaves. If you're satisfied, keep going further. Shopify, they have a lot of great resources online. They did total opposite, and we did podcasts with them together. You should check it out. React Universe on Air podcast with Shopify Mustafa Ali, who's the sort of technical person behind that effort. And so we talk a lot about challenges of migrating to React Native, including what happens with your native engineers. But typically, what I wanted to sort of call out here is the fact that they started from the top. Their approach was let's order screens by impact and start rewriting the biggest screens and most important screens first. Reason for that, very simple. If the technology is not going to satisfy our requirements, we'd rather get to know that very early rather than at the end. And so it worked out for them as well. Something to keep in mind as an anecdote, I guess, because their engineering resources are pretty heavy. And then we have Meta, obviously, who created React Native. And they were using React Native in brownfield from the very beginning. In fact, this is the way they do it all the time. With commitment, you can keep you can be safe that that use case will always be important. They use it in marketplace, which is serving billions of people every day, huge number, performing very well. And marketplace is, from what I've been reading online, the reason why people got excited about Facebook again, especially the younger audience, because people are making deals on marketplace, which is what is attracting users to Facebook application again, which in result only shows how important that technology for Meta is. The trend is clear. Companies are increasingly adapting React Native, and latest news and research from the US shows that most startups are recruiting React Native developers first for the speed of use, time to market. And you also have to keep in mind that with the sort of increase of AI in our everyday lives and increase of agents for development, React and React Native going because LLMs are pretty good at writing that code. So if that sounds like a plan, before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to highlight two things. The first one is this is very easy to do. I mean, at least to get started. If you have a native application and you feel like you're not moving as fast as you could, or you're exploring React Native, or you maybe started but you didn't completed it, whatever is your status, you can get a production-ready solution under a month based on our experience. We're happy to help you with this, but if you have your own engineers, we're also happy to provide you some feedback, tips, and tricks. Point is, you can join the React Native community within a month from today if you decide. And so I guess at this point we can park it up. Just one more slide where I did an update. I updated in the meantime, but it's okay. Scan this QR code to join our newsletter, but also I'm going to type it in the chat as well. But I'm also going to say it. Feel free to email me at mike@callstack.com. And we're more than happy to answer any of the follow-up questions you have. If you either don't want to talk about your application on a webinar because maybe it's under NDA or something that you're not feeling like you want to share, this one we can take offline and we can talk about it. So we have roughly 10 to 15 minutes left for some Q&A. And I guess if you want to participate in the Q&A, feel free to drop a question in the chat. In the meantime, I can kick it off with my first question. My first question would be to you, Burak, given the advanced setup. How was the performance and reception after you started that migration? We talked about theory. What about the actual feedback from the client?
Okay. So what we have done is we implemented the first stage, which was the POC stage, and the client already had a React Native application, and they wanted to bring the React Native only features that they filled with web views to their native app. So again, as you said, they wanted to replace their web views, and I can say this happily that they were pretty happy with replacing some of their web views, like their payment. All of those were changed, and they had better UX thanks to React Native having a better UX than web views.
That is interesting. So typically we've been talking about, you have native app and you want to move faster and maybe start migrating, but you can see from their case, like you may have some other application already and you may be like, yeah, why don't we just use that instead? So we have two questions in the chat, and there are two related to each other. So we'll start with the first one from Alfredo. Thank you for the question. Is there a GitHub repo with demo advanced setup scaffolding? And another one, which is also related, thank you for the question. Is there any chance that this framework for brownfield integration will become open source? I will let you, Burak, answer this one as well, because you are sort of more involved in that project than me. So I'll let you take the glory and answer that.
So people just ask us. So in general, people ask us when it's going to be open sourced. So it's going to be an easier question to answer. Is there any chance? 100% we're going to be open sourcing the React Native framework that we've been working on soon, let's say. And if we have a GitHub repo with the demo, First of all, we have a pending PR in this framework that we have that has this advanced workflow demo. And then I think we also have another GitHub repo that I'm not sure if we have opened it yet.
Yeah, so I can help with that. So there is a few projects that we are working on right now in this space, and I think the best will be for me to try sharing my screen, and then I can walk you through what we have here. So let's see. All right. So this is the first repo, the React Native brownfield. And React Native brownfield is how it all started many years ago. At first, React Native brownfield was just a collection of utilities for doing different migration, for doing different communication between React Native and native. So all the RCT review factories that you've seen today on our slides, the sort of how do we migrate, how do we call UI view from native side and that renders React native component, that is easy. But then you have communication issues. How do I pass my data? How do I communicate React native navigation with the native navigation when I dismiss model? And it's two separate worlds you have to connect with themselves. And this library is the library that we created for that purpose. It has 6 years already. So as you can see, it's been around for a while. We are working on a complete overhaul and bring in more features so that all the benefits that you've seen today with the automatic packaging will be available in this library in the next month. If you're interested in being notified when it's ready, our newsletter is good way to stay up to date. But also, just like I said, you can email me at mike@callstack.com, and I'll be happy to follow up with you on this one as well. And then we have another one, which as far as I'm aware, we haven't open sourced yet, but I will show you the landing page because we have launched a waiting list just about last week. So this is it. It's called a React Native framework. Meta last year created. I'm not sure if what's the demographics here and how much you're familiar with the React Native and framework situation there. But let me just fast forward it and say that we have created, and it's sort of being rolled out as we speak to our customers. We are testing this in production because we want to release it and make sure it's awesome. This is our sort of collection of utilities for building React Native apps at a scale. Typically, if you were researching React Native today, you've came across Expo, and Expo is amazing, but it is even better if you're building from scratch. We see a lot of our customers struggle with existing apps. They struggle with their own CI/CD pipelines and so many different ifs and else's about their infrastructure that is just hard to satisfy at all. And so we created this framework. On the video here, you see just a demonstration of our build pipeline, which means once one of your engineers builds the app, all of you get it for free automatically. So there is no need to rebuild it 5 times. Just build it once and everybody can run it, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like Expo, but on your infrastructure. And now for this one, we are working on a bunch of cool new features. And one of the features, as you can see, we already have it because we are already testing it, is the brownfield integration. And brownfield integration, or the pull request that Burak has been talking about, is that feature. So starting from the next month, when we do a public beta, if you are interested to join and participate in that private beta, email me, mike@callstack.com, or go to the enterprise-framework.callstack.com to read more about this. And you will have access to that. Basically, what it is at the end of the day is a command line tool. So the idea is that you will be able to just write enterprise framework, build the artifacts. And then it will, depending on your choice, either put it on your internal repo or maybe send it automatically to your native devs. The idea will be that all these steps are tricky. We're just making that super easy so you can get started without having to sort of figure that all out yourself. So that would be the sort of ultimate thing. You can sign up to the waiting list. We just released it last week. We got a bunch of people waiting, and it's pretty cool. So that is a bunch of utilities that will be helpful. And you might be thinking that this is not super. I don't know. Like people often overlook that piece, and many times I see companies dropping React Native, and they often complain about React Native itself, but in fact, it's the way they integrated it that's the problem, not the framework itself. So
It's a skill
um,
issue.
yeah, exactly. Um, exactly. So that is regarding itself. Now, I wanted to follow up with the question about the brownfield integration. When you were building the sort of POC and integrating that, since the client already had React Native, like
Exactly.
how was the sort of native engineers versus React Native situation there? When you
Mm.
introduced React Native to the main native app, everybody was sort of expecting that because they were used to the pipeline, or like how did that go? How
So
the app
they
ended up being, from the CI/CD perspective and build times as well.
Yeah. So first of all, they had lots of native engineers, and I think like their point initially was not to replace the native apps with React Native, but just to bring new features even faster. But
Mhm.
they also told us that the trend now in the company is to fully migrate to React Native eventually. Um, and what we've done is we had a React Native repository with this brownfield code that we talked about. They also had a shell application that they could test React Native code against. And we had a CI pipeline that packaged everything and published it via the SPM and their private Maven repository. And once that's done, you can obviously go to your native application and then on CI or where you update your React Native application or even native application or even manually, you can just grab the latest Swift package manager package or the Gradle package.
Nice.
So they
That's
had a
that's
pretty
pretty
smooth
cool.
integration.
That's pretty cool. And then, did you integrate just one screen, or like how granular was the migration? What did you start with?
Yeah. So we had two cases. Case A, we had full screens and they were working just fine. We could get any React Native screen working in the native application in the stack, obviously. And then we had the case B, which was components. So we take any component that's not full screen and
Yeah,
then put it into native screen. And that case was also working brilliantly.
nice, nice. That's pretty cool. I remember one of the first brownfield scenarios that was often overlooked, but I was a huge fan of that was the sort of the bidirectional stuff. It's not that easy, but many times, typically people are concerned about UI, how we
Yeah.
make it feel unified. And I just feel like, from my perspective, like React Native compared to Flutter, for example, like huge win is the sort of
Yeah.
ease of integration. I mean, it's not like Flutter wouldn't be as easy, I guess. Um,
Probably right. Yeah. I
yeah,
think
so that
it
is
would be easier to start from scratch with Flutter than to go with the brownfield scenario,
yeah.
which means it's not flexible enough in this case.
Yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, I think when we see a lot of interesting opportunities when it comes to using React Native itself is typically when like good opportunity is when you have legacy code on the native side and you just want to move faster, maybe bring your web features to it and sort of keep the release train unified. But at the same time, another good use case, the use case that we see every once in a while, is when there is a new platform, maybe, or new device.
No.
And if you have three native code bases and now you have to create a fourth one, it's a totally different discussion rather than
Yeah.
to get it for free, right?
Yeah. I think we had the Vision OS support in
Yes.
2 weeks or so. So it was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I don't think it would be that otherwise. Um, and the great thing about React Native in that case as well, thanks to Oscar, great work, is that it hides away a lot of VR primitives in a way
Yeah.
that it's a component. You're used to components. And typically my challenge when it comes to building VR apps or AR apps to that point is the whole different mental model, and I'm just struggling to learn that on top of the native language. And in this case, it just kind of makes you feel like you're at home.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like not even VR, but even with Android and iOS, you don't have to learn a bunch of things to be able to build a native app. Like I didn't know what a fragment is until like last year, and I built lots of mobile apps with React Native.
Yeah, you're totally right. My story with React Native started when I built an iOS application for my client, and then they wanted me to build Android because I was a full stack guy. They were like, "Yeah, just do it, whatever." And started learning Android, but then I quickly realized there is no way I'm ever mastering that. Like I just couldn't get around Java and XML and all those activities. Just the mental model of Android was totally different from what I would, kind of expect. So, even today when I go through Android code, I'm somewhat surprised it is working. But the point is, thanks to React Native, I was able to just sort of roll with it, and that is also pretty cool because if you start using it, all the different teams can be just one, which is also pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So we have one last question on the chat, I think, before we drop, which is like, what are the best resources for mastering, React Native? I guess this is a good question for many reasons. One of them, the fact that it's always good to be great engineer, but also having the proper transition of knowledge is also very important in your organization as well. So I guess we can, while we wrap it up, each one of us can say what we think is the best resource. I can say from my perspective, I find a lot of satisfaction in just building stuff. So I was not really up to speed with Swift and C++ as of last year, but I started building with Nitro modules, some native modules, and then I was somewhat forced to do it, to learn it. And then I got up to speed very quickly. So, on top of obvious reasons and obvious resources, I would say nothing beats actual coding. It's very satisfactory, especially if you're a designer. That would be my 5 cents.
Yeah, 100% agree. And like when it comes to resources, I guess the official documentation, obviously,
Yes.
and then B, if you have advanced scenarios, you have to go and read the source code to some degree.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, this reminds me of the live stream we did the other day when we were going through the Vim tutorial, and it's just like with anything, like just have to keep doing it, and then you will perfect it. But if you stop, then you won't. Great. So we did over an hour, almost an hour of talking. I think it was fun. For me, that was my first webinar, I think, ever, because for some very strange reason, I've never done it before. And it's super awesome because we can practice the slides before conference or after the conference and, share knowledge with you in a smaller audience than live stream. So I would say it was very fun. And I don't know, Burak, for you, I think it was also one of the first times at Callstack.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
how was it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you, and so I actually love talking about this stuff in general.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, every time we're on the live stream or doing this, I'm like, not, some people are afraid or maybe freak out or have some, like stressed out. And like some people just genuinely just kind of go with the flow. And I see that's the case, which is pretty awesome. Awesome. So that wraps it up from my side. I really wanted to thank everybody for joining and for staying over. We did have a rather casual but steady audience throughout the whole time, which is great. Means that nobody decided to drop after seeing our beautiful slides. So you can reach out to me and Burak on Twitter. You can find us on our website and email us as well. We're happy to talk with you, and see you next time, I guess.
Yep. See you next time.